I have talked at length, like my problems with Keir Starmer. you know, on many a good morning walk, we've spent the entire walk dedicated to criticizing, what Starmer has done wrong, and in some cases he has, done some stuff right. But the question, of course, of Starmer's leadership, is he the right guy to lead the Labour to a general election victory? Still very much in doubt. Now, don't get me wrong, Starmer has brought Labour back into a good elective position. As we've said before, the big problem with Corbyn was the fact that a lot of people on the left did not recognise the political current reality we have, certainly in the UK. You have, again, 25% on the right, 25% on the left, and a massive, depending again which one you read, 30 to 35% who are centrists. So the further you push in one direction, the more centrists you scare away. Now, it's not that Corbyn was going really extreme with his views. He was, shall we say, far from going full, complete, total Marxist, as sort of the press claimed. But because Corbyn did not engage in the PR game, they got away with it. And what did you get? You got a lot of people who voted for the Conservatives because they thought that Corbyn was a terrorist or that he was a Marxist. And as a result, Labour had its biggest election loss in quite some time. And that is unfortunately the reality. Unless we change our political system, at least the voting system, for a push for PR, which, again, you should all be behind that regardless of what party you support. But especially if you are on the left and you really want to get, shall we say, more socialist policies or go really hardcore progressive, then, well, making Labour support PR will be a fantastic opportunity. And this September at the Labour conference will be that chance and opportunity. So hopefully we get it past this time and this goes into the Labour manifesto, and this is something that Labour can support and goes full-heartedly into supporting that. But we're going to talk about, of course, the Wakefield win. And even now, Starmer's leadership position is still very much on shaky ground. So, as always, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a notification link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help support the channel that way. So, on we go over to The Guardian. The title of Chalk Up a Win for Steady Starmer, but things could still get shaky. Keir Starmer looked upbeat as he addressed reporters on Friday morning after his party's solid performance in the Wakefield by-election. After a rocky fortnight in which he scolded the shadow cabinet for briefing the press that he was boring, Starmer's team believed that the 12.7% swing will calm the nerves and show that their steady-as-she-goes strategy is working. What's important is that we can now talk about the fact that getting Labour into government under Keir is a one-term project, said a Labour source. Of course, by-election results are often quirky, but a swing on that scale, if replicated nationwide, could see a majority Labour government returned at the next general election. In particular, the results suggest the fabled Red Wall could be rebuilt. No one's measuring the curtains in Downing Street just yet, but we're on the right path, the source said. Starmer's team spent the first months in charge trucking behind the government on COVID and fighting a series of internal battles to underline the fact that he was very much not Jeremy Corbyn, most strikingly by removing the whip from the former leader over the anti-Semitism. He has spent much time of the interviewing period relentlessly trying to undermine Boris Johnson's credibility over Partygate and the economy, though Johnson has done much of that work himself. Now, Starmer's team say he's preparing to set out more in the coming weeks and months about Labour's message in the run-up to the next general election, which is likely to be squarely focused on the perilous state of the economy. That is about goddamn time. I have said multiple times, Starmer should just release early a Labour manifesto and just go, this is what we are, this is what I stand for, this is what we're backing, and not be afraid to make changes. As Ed Miliband said, Labour needs to act more boldly, and it should not be afraid of putting forward policies. So anyway, where are we? The windfall tax policy, worked up by Rachel Reeves and Ed Miliband, scored a direct hit earlier this year, inflicting considerable discomfort on a split Tory party before Rishi Sunak ultimately adopted it. Starmer's team are adamant that they did not need to be rushed into announcing more policies, pointing out that the autumn conference, which will be more focused on the country than the last one. They also insist that they are relaxed about the prospect of the shape-shifting Conservative Party swapping Johnson for another leader. The Prime Minister successfully pulled off the trick after appearing to be a change candidate in 2019, despite representing a party that had been in power for 9 years. Some shadow cabinet members fear Starmer's appeal as a serious grown-up candidate set against the chaotic Johnson would be diminished if he faced, say, Penny Mordaunt, Nadhim Zahawi, or Jeremy Hunt. Labour's leaders' allies play down that risk, however, suggesting that if Johnson departs, he would have to take the idea of a fresh start for his party. If they move on to another leader, it actually really helps us with our ability to say, you've had 4 Tory prime ministers now. At some point, you've got to see the problem is the party rather than the personalities. The increasingly dire economic backdrop with the growing flatlining and inflation heading for 11% is also likely to help Labour land its overarching argument that the Conservatives have badly mishandled the economy over the past decade and have no plan to fix it. Yet, Starmer's colleagues still fret whether he and his team have the ideas, the policies, or the overarching message to carry Labour to success in 2024, particularly if the Tories chuck Johnson over the side. And they worry too about his leadership style, encapsulated most recently in this week's ban on frontbenchers attending RMT picket lines, which turned into the issue of a trial of strength. He's still to decide on whether to actually discipline those MPs who defied his instructions. Starmer told his resistive shadow cabinet last week, saying, "What's boring is being in opposition. On the basis of the Wakefield result, his allies can now argue that boring works." Yet, he is unlikely to still the concerns about his leadership for long, and September's Labour conference is already being widely regarded in the party as a crucial test. So, that is obviously where we are. And remember, I really think that Corbyn didn't particularly do a good job against Boris Johnson at certain times. I think Starmer has certainly been the guy to do that. He's certainly proved, I think, a lot more effective at PMQs, but also Angela Rayner has as well. She's proven her mettle many times on the floor in Parliament, and of course, so has Ed Miliband as well. So even if we do end up changing leaders to someone else like Angela Rayner or back to Ed Miliband, we've got some good caliber candidates in our back pocket, whereas the Conservatives absolutely have no one. And I think it does come down to policies. It does come down to that overarching message. That is what Labour has to get right. Because it doesn't matter, as we saw during the Corbyn years, if you have all these fantastic policies that are really going to make people's lives better, if you do not have the message. But just as oppositely wise as the Conservatives have shown, you can have a really good message but not have the policies. So ultimately, Labour has to get these two right. And I think that Starmer's decision here to go into really describing economic policies, what it is we are going to do, what is the UK's long-term economic strategy going to be under a Labour government is going to be put forward pretty strong, and I think will do very, very well against a Conservative government who has no idea but a strong message by saying, oh, well, we've taken back control, we've got Brexit done, which in practice haven't really happened, but sound good. And Labour needs to get those 2 points down. It needs the policy, it needs the messaging. And if they can get those two things right, the next general election will be a complete walkover for them. And at that point, it doesn't really have to be, Keir Starmer leading the party if they get those two things right. It could be anyone. As long as they get those two things right, fantastic. So, as always, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button on your way out. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much for supporting the channel. And of course, we'll see you all next time.